Think most students in America's high schools are ready for the academic challenge of higher education? Think again. In reality, just 30% of graduating seniors are prepared to attend a four-year college. The outlook is even more daunting for graduates looking to enter a technology-savvy workforce. Is it time for an extreme makeover of high school as we know it? Governor Mark Warner thinks so. Tonight, he shares his vision with Hampton Roads students. Here's the challenge facing today's high school seniors. 2/3 of all new jobs created over the next decade will require some post-secondary education. And for students planning to go from commencement to career, most jobs, even now, require applicants with specific certifications and better training. Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis, and tonight we'll find out why Virginia Governor Mark Warner is spearheading efforts to redesign America's high schools. And we'll hear from local students in our audience this evening to see how they feel about their own experiences and what changes they would like to see. It's a fine-looking group, and we're glad to have them with us tonight. In partnership with the National Governors Association, we welcome you to this special WHRO presentation, Extreme High School Education for the Real World. Governor Warner, nice to have you back with us tonight at WHRO. Good to see you tonight.
It's always great to be back with you.
And I know that as the chair of the National Governors Association, you get to pick a topic for the governors to focus their attention on. I wonder what it was that caused you to pick this idea of high school reform.
Well, what made me choose high school is that most of education reform over the last decade has been about standards or about preschool, kind of with the assumption by the time kids got to high school, they do okay. But if you look at the numbers, you look at the statistics, it's not the case. 30% of the kids who start ninth grade don't graduate from high school. Many of the kids who graduate from high school who go on to college need extra remediation. And the United States right now has fallen to 16th amongst industrialized nations in terms of graduation rates. So we've got to do better. And for the most part, a major re-examination of high school hasn't taken place in this country and in this Commonwealth for over 100 years.
No. I know your colleague Governor Taft said it was a sacred institution, this thing we call high school.
Well, it's sacred, but it's time to shake it up a little bit. Everything else, as the economy changes, we've got to make sure that high school is a meaningful experience, that that diploma means something, and that unfortunately that when senior year comes around that you can't goof off the last year, because making sure that senior year becomes a transition either to college or to workplace is very important.
Yeah, and there's some terrific ideas that will also have an impact on the pocketbooks of parents as well. So it's a show tonight for both the parents and students, and happy to have our guest students with us in the studio tonight. We look forward to some very, very tough questions from them. Well, some of the areas that this initiative focuses on include the relationship between tough classes and success in college or on the job, the alignment between the expectations of high schools and colleges in their coursework, especially around those advanced placement classes, the School to Work program. Can students secure future success at jobs based on high school offerings? And then there's that tough issue of remediation. What will it take to get more kids ready for work and for jobs? There's a lot to tackle there, but let's talk a little bit about a couple of those initiatives. That question of the advanced placement coursework and exams is one that we've really looked at hard in this Commonwealth.
That is absolutely right, Kathy. Matter of fact, what we are trying to offer in every high school in Virginia is the chance for juniors and seniors in high school to earn at least a full semester's worth of college credit in high school. And then we were able to get all of our colleges in Virginia, public and private, 2-year and 4-year, to agree to accept those credits and count them towards the degree requirement. So they're not just electives. So as that young student decides, do I take the easy course or do I stretch a little bit, take the advanced placement course, go ahead and take a dual enrollment with a community college, we now have a reason for them to go ahead and stretch, because if you can get that jump start on college, you can knock off a semester's worth of college in high school, you can save your parents $5,000 off the cost of higher education.
Got my attention. Well, on this issue of going from the classroom to the job, we know now that so many jobs now, you can get the high school diploma and good for you, but unless you have some sort of certification to go into so many of these technical jobs, you really don't have much going for you.
You're absolutely right. Again, 20 years ago, with a high school diploma alone, you could go out and make a good living for yourself and your family. Maybe working in a manufacturing job or another job that didn't require additional skills. But it's going to be less than 5% of all the jobs by 2010 will be, in effect, low-skilled jobs. So a high school diploma may get you an ability to go out and flip burgers at minimum wage, but it's not going to get you the skills you need if you're not going on to college. And a four-year college isn't the right choice.
Yeah.
One of the things that I believe is that we've got to place in our education system as much value on those kids who want to become plumbers and electricians as those kids who want to become doctors and lawyers. So here's what we did. We said, let's encourage those students who are going straight into the workplace and say, if you go ahead, work hard, graduate, pass your SOLs, we'll work with you to get an industry certification, a computer technician or a nurse's aide. And if it requires you to a few extra courses at the community college to earn that industry certification, we, the state, will pick up the costs. Now, we're doing that in about 50 high schools right now. My hope is next year we're able to take it all across the Commonwealth.
I tell you, that is so important to get that certification that you need. And one of the key goals of this education makeover is that opportunity for certification, giving more opportunities for high school students to graduate better prepared for college or for a successful career. And here's how Virginia Beach is making that happen. At Virginia Beach's Advanced Technology Center, students have their fingertips on the future.
Here we work with computer-aided drawings. We learn how engineers design parts before they actually make them, so they see how it's going to work. We also work with robots and design programs where we can continuously do the same thing over and over, like how companies do it.
What letters will you probably not use?
Rather than fall into the trap of senioritis, at the ATC, students spend half their day gaining hands-on experience in technology-based fields.
A lot of students in high school, their senior year, they're doing less and less classwork, and something like this would be an important prerequisite for a lot of college courses where you can know and understand the very basis of some of our communication systems and our networking systems.
Down the hallway in A+ Computer Repair, students get to know computers inside and out.
Getting the hands-on really helps. You can be a race car driver, but that doesn't mean you're actually a mechanic who builds the engine and takes it apart. I guess I would consider myself the mechanic of the computer and also the user.
Students say the work they're doing today puts them ahead of their peers when it comes time to get a job in the real world.
Instead of an employer having to pay to teach you, you already know, and they're like, hey, I want to hire you because you already know all of this. Well, that's how they're getting the job done in Virginia Beach, and it is terrific to have with us tonight the Commonwealth Secretary of Education, Belle Whelan. Nice to have you with us in the studio tonight.
Great being here, Kathy.
I know that you must have been very excited when you heard that this was the initiative that Governor Warner had chosen for the National Governors Association.
Well, all the work we've done in Virginia has paid off, and it's great to be able to take it across the country.
Yeah, and you're getting a lot of interest from other states in these initiatives.
Yes, we are. Indeed, we are.
What are they most interested in?
Well, the whole idea of the pathway to industry certification that you were just discussing has really gotten a lot of inquiry from across the country, trying to make sure that we're preparing students for the job market. So that's most exciting. But then the AP initiative and the Commonwealth Course Collaborative that the governor talked about, where we got 62 of 65 institutions to agree to count those courses as meeting course requirements, not just as electives. It's like getting that many faculty together to say we're going to do that has just been really exciting.
Well done. That is exciting. That is exciting indeed. And it does look like from some of the work we've seen from the National Governors Association conferences and from meetings like these around the country, there really does seem to be a fair amount of enthusiasm among these governors for some of these initiatives.
The governor mentioned in his speech at NGA that 30 governors have now talked about high school reform in their State of the State addresses, where 2 years ago it wasn't even on the radar screen.
So it's a critically important issue and getting some nationwide attention. Well, thanks very much for being with us tonight. We may put a question or two to you if you don't mind. Would that be all right?
All the tough questions.
All the tough ones for Secretary Whelan. I like that idea. Well, I tell you, we have some folks in our audience tonight who are very happy to answer any questions that we have some folks in our audience who are going to be asking the questions. Right. You get to answer them, and Secretary Whelan gets to answer them. So we're very happy to have all of them in the audience tonight. I know you've done a lot of work talking with students really all over the country as you've gone around to these town hall meetings. What are you hearing from students?
Well, what I'm hearing is, interestingly enough, that a lot of the students, particularly the ones who've graduated, will actually be willing to say, you know, I wish high school had been a little tougher. I wish I would have gone ahead and taken that more rigorous course.
And you have survey data that actually demonstrates that.
We have survey data that demonstrates that, because I think when they get into college and they find, oh my gosh, this is a little tougher. You know, I wish I would have worked a little harder in high school. Or they get into the workplace and they find they're not ready for the workplace. They're willing to step up. Now, sometimes that's a little harder to convince a student who might be in 11th grade or 12th grade that taking a tougher course at that point makes sense. But that was one of the things we found. We've also found a lot of concern about the high-stakes test. Just as we have put in place the standards of learning exams, and they're not perfect, but we've got to find a way to measure students' progress. We've got to find a way to hold schools accountable. And I think actually, compared to what I'm hearing in other states, our SOLs are a lot better than what other states are having to deal with.
And we've certainly had a couple more years practice at
We
it
have,
too,
we have.
getting those kinks worked out. Well, joining us in our studio audience this evening are students and parents and educators. WHRO's Director of Educational Programming, Angie Callahan, is on one of our microphones tonight, as is Education Specialist Libby Poe, and the students have a lot on their minds tonight to share with the governor, and they even started before the show started, so they are not shy a bit. Let's go to Angie with the first question.
Okay, this is Chad. He's from Hickory High School in Chesapeake, and he has an interesting situation he
Okay.
wants to talk to you about.
Good evening, Governor.
Good evening.
I know you want to make it easier for high school students to earn college credit, but what about the reverse? My situation as a junior, my school did not accept the English for the college that they offered, and therefore I could not do it. We had nothing to do. So I only have English to graduate with, and how would you change this process?
So in other words, you were willing to take a dual enrollment course of English at
Yes,
the
sir.
community college at TCC, but your high school wouldn't accept it?
It was a harder English course at Johnson & Wales University.
Well, I think that's a great point. We've got to make sure that our school divisions are willing to accept the more rigorous courses and count them towards your high school diploma. And I will make sure that we follow up on that in that situation in Chesapeake, because generally we found that schools are quite willing to accept the community college course or the AP course, but I'll check into this situation in Chesapeake.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's a
Good
great
point.
point.
This is the kind of things, this is why these town hall meetings are important, because I learn as well where we've still got problems that we've got to work out.
All right, thank you for your question. Thank you so much. Well, Libby Poe, who do you have tonight?
I'm here with Molly. Molly's a sophomore at Bayside High School in Virginia Beach, and she has a question in regard to special needs students.
Okay.
Students with special needs span the entire spectrum, from those who may need remediation in math or reading or even study skills, all the way up to students who are stagnating in traditional curriculum and may benefit from independent study curriculum. How can the school system be responsive to these special needs and make the curriculum rewarding, challenging, and accessible to all students wherever their abilities may fall?
That's a great question.
That's a great question, and there's really no easy answer. Special needs students, we've got to have enough flexibility in our education system to meet those special needs students, to not leave them behind. Matter of fact, the president put in place a piece of legislation called No Child Left Behind. Now, it's got some good and bad parts to it, but one good part about it is that it strips away the ability for a school to say, hey, we've got 80% or 85% of our kids doing real well, but if the special needs students are not doing well, then the school's not going to meet what's called adequate yearly progress, the AYP criteria. So that's a good notion, that it's really putting a new light on special needs students. But one of the problems has been with the way No Child Left Behind has been put in place so far is that it's saying those special needs students have to meet exactly the same criteria that mainstream students are. And that's really not fair, because as you pointed out, some students have special needs, going to learn a different way, and we may need, and in Virginia we've put in place alternative tests for those students. Yeah. But great question.
Indeed, and it's an interesting question too when you also think about all the new research in brain science that's come out in the last 3 to 5 years that tells us that different genders learn at different rates. It's okay, they all catch up at the end. But this is important in the way that we work it out in the classroom.
Different kids learn by either hearing or by seeing or by touching things, and it is something that I think we've still got a long way to make some more progress on. But in Virginia, at least, we have put in different standards, and we're trying to get the federal government to have the same kind of flexibility with No Child Left Behind. But great question.
I'd like to add that the spotlight has really been on special needs students at the lower end of the spectrum, but what about those students whose needs are not being met at the higher end of the spectrum? Because the graduation requirements require all 4 years of English, but in my particular circumstances, my teachers felt that I would benefit from skipping to English 11 rather than completing English 10. But the state graduation requirements require English 9, 10, 11, and 12. And so legally I could not graduate if I were to skip ahead to English 11 in the 10th grade.
Well, again, I'm taking away more than I'm giving out tonight. I think that you should be able, if you've got the ability to move or bypass a grade, if you're willing to then take a more advanced English course. I think it's important that you have those 4 years of English, but there's nothing that says if your teachers say you should be able to skip a grade, that you couldn't supplement or fulfill that extra requirement with a first-year college English course.
Secretary Whelan, I know you're keeping track of all
You're
of
keeping
this as
track
well.
of this, Belle. We got homework tonight.
Yes,
That's
sir.
right. It is a no homework night, though, for our guests in the studio. We did confirm that.
All right.
And we're hopeful for a special gubernatorial dispensation for extra credit for the participation.
I think we might be able to work.
Very good. Angie, go ahead.
I have Melissa here from Windsor High School in Isle of Wight, and she has a question about clubs.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What role will career and technical clubs such as FCCLA and DECA play in the new reform for high schools?
Well, I think that career and technical clubs are a great focus, because if we're going to be honest, I think for a long time we've had this idea that the only path to success is a four-year college. And in too many of our schools, we've treated career and technical education, or what when I was growing up we called vocational education, like a second-class education. I think it's super that you've got career and technical clubs in your high school. We need to support those. That's one of the reasons why I've put this additional focus on career and technical education on this path to industry certification, saying that if it takes an extra course or two at the community college after you graduate to go ahead and get that industry certification, we, the state, will pick up the cost of that, because that's going to add about $5,000 to your earning power. And from the state standpoint, that means you're going to pay a few more taxes. We can make up that. But one of the things we found this past year that I thought was pretty fascinating, because there had not been focus, maybe at your high school there is, but in a lot of high schools on career and technical education teaching, when we put the focus and put this new initiative out, we found that almost half of the career and technical education high school teachers in Virginia weren't certified themselves. So they might be very competent teachers and know how to teach computers, know how to teach basic auto mechanic or basic nurse's aide or the host of different industry certifications. But if they weren't certified themselves, the course wouldn't count towards the industry certification. So we were able to go out and get about 500 of the career and technical education teachers up to certification last year. And that's a great step forward for you and all of your classmates who are taking career and technical education. A great question.
Thank you.
And to follow that up, I think it's very interesting to look at this data that you take 100 high school students on average, and if I remember this correctly, 100 freshmen, you only get something like 69 of them heading
Kathy,
into college?
that is...
So you've got to have options, right?
You've got to have options. A lot of the students, one of the things we don't have in this country that I've found as head of the National Governors, we don't have a common definition for a dropout rate. I've seen 3 different studies of Virginia's high school graduation or dropout rates. They had 3 different scores. Matter of fact, we don't follow until recently if a student transfers to a private school or moves out of state. And here in Hampton Roads, a lot of military families will move out of state, get transferred, or get homeschooled. They count as a dropout in our current numbers. So we need a better data system. One of the things that frustrates me a great deal as a former business person is we need more good, solid data in education. So we can really figure out what works and what doesn't work, and then make corrections accordingly.
And that we're not hiding problems as well.
And that we're not hiding problems. We've got to be willing. That's again why some of the earlier comments about SOLs, and I'm sure they'll come around to that. They're not perfect, but we've got to find ways to measure our progress.
Indeed so. Go ahead, Libby.
Yes, I'm here with Brian from Kecoughtan High School, and he's got a question in regard to grading scales.
All right.
Well, my proposition is more of an opinion than a question.
Sure.
As many of you may know, Virginia high schools, they have different grading scales. Well, what if we all had the same grading scale? Well, I believe that if the Virginia high schools shared the same grading scale, it would set a better basis for expectations in Virginia. So say if one specific high school scores less in test core subjects than another school, well, they cannot use the excuse, well, we had a different grading scale. Theirs is higher or lower. And I believe if we all share the same grading scales, this would allow more high schools to determine what areas of academics need to be pursued more than most other areas,
I think it's again an interesting point. It's one of the reasons why a number of years back when we put in place the standards of learning and the whole system of accountability and trying to raise the standards, it was partially for that very reason, because if in one school a 90 counts as an A, in another school a 93 counts as an A, and a 92 counts as a B, then you're really not judging fairly. So having an SOL exam, and again, let me make clear, I know they're not perfect, but just as you got to keep score in a basketball game, you got to keep score in schools as well, between schools, was an effort to try to make sure that whether you graduate from a high school on the Eastern Shore, or whether you graduate from a high school in Southwest Virginia, or from Fairfax County in Northern Virginia, you're going to have mastered the same knowledge base. But the notion of trying to add to that in terms of a standardized grading approach is worth looking into as well. Another good question.
Yeah. Go ahead, Angie.
Hi, I have a parent. This is Valerie. She has a senior at Lakeland High School in
I
Suffolk.
thought you were going to tell us she was the senior.
And Valerie has a equity question.
Good evening, Governor.
Good evening, Valerie.
Why do some school districts offer more AP and dual credit classes than others?
Well, again, great question. One of the reasons has been that until recently, many of the school systems have not had the appropriate financial support. And if we're going to be, again, honest, until last year when we took a long time to get the legislature to agree to our tax reform plan, the state wasn't stepping up and paying its full share of costs for local education. So that meant that richer communities could end up providing more support, and poorer communities then, if the state wasn't paying its fair share, had to make do with less. Last year we were able to add $1.5 billion of additional money for example, AP courses. And that goes a long way towards putting a little more equity in the system. On top of that, we've got to do something else. Even when the state does provide the additional resources, particularly in smaller communities, it may be tough to have enough AP teachers in the high school to provide a full course offering. That's why we actually have created a virtual AP school now, where in every high school across Virginia, if your school doesn't offer the AP courses, we will offer them over the broadband technology that we offer, and you can now have a much broader offering, even in the smallest little school in Southwest Virginia.
And I'm guessing WHRO might get involved in that at some
Absolutely.
point. Am I right, Angie Callahan?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Well, so you didn't know about that, did you? Oh, terrific. All right.
Well, it's new this year, and one of the things we're finding in this whole attempt to offer a broader array of AP courses, these more opportunities with dual enrollment in the community college, it's one thing to announce it in Richmond. It's another thing to make sure that the information actually gets down to the principal and guidance counselor and parent level in every school, and we hope to even do a better job this coming year.
You've noticed that problem, huh?
Amen. Amen.
All right, Libby, go ahead.
Governor, I'm here with Parker. He's representing Kings Fork High School, and he's got a question regarding the shortage of teachers.
Great.
Yes, with the Tidewater region expanding so quickly and all the new people moving in, whether it's from military or just they move here, a lot of new schools are coming up. I attend one of them.
Sure.
And when we came to our school, they picked a lot of the teachers from Lakeland and Nansemond River, which are neighbor us. And I'm just curious to know since we have a teacher shortage, what do you plan to do with the growth of the population, but the shortage of teachers?
Parker, we could spend the whole rest of the hour talking about that, but let me give you a couple of ideas. One, again, going back to Valerie's question, the last question, the fact that the state has made a record new investment in public education will allow a lot of the communities around the Commonwealth to pay their teachers a little bit more, which is a good way to help attract teachers and actually get them to stay teaching. Second thing we need to do, and what were able to announce literally about a month ago, was that Sallie Mae, the Virginia-based company that's the nation's largest student loan organization, has agreed that anybody that decides to become a teacher and teaches for 3 years in Virginia, they will pay them back 10% of their loan. So if you borrow $25,000 to go to college, become a teacher, they'll send you a check after 3 years for $2,500 to stay teaching here in Virginia. So a little incentive there. Third thing we've got to do is we've got to recognize that particularly not so much in some of our fastest growing suburban schools, but in our more challenged schools, some of our inner city schools, some of our rural schools, we actually lose 50% of our teachers in the first 5 years of teaching because they give up on the teaching profession. And we almost have, to be honest, a perverse system in this country where we put sometimes the least experienced and oftentimes most unqualified teachers in our toughest schools. one of the things we're trying in the state at this point is a financial incentive to encourage teachers to go into some of these tough schools. Again, they've got to stay for 3 years. We're going to pay them, we're trying in a couple communities right now, up to a $15,000 bonus, and then pay some additional money for those teachers who are already in that system and are seeing student performance improve. We're going to pay them an extra bonus on top for improved student performance. So those are a couple of ideas. One final idea is we need to do a better job of it's not only teacher pay, it's not only being able to pay off student loans. We've got to make sure we've got strong leadership at schools. So we've got a program we've put in place called Turnaround Specialists, where we're training certain principals to go in. Again, we challenged UVA to help us here, their business school and their education school, to help train some principals to go into our, again, some of our most struggling schools to help turn them around. If they stay for 3 years with this turnaround specialist, improve scores, we'll give them some additional compensation, additional power, and we find from a lot of teachers that having that good principal in the school is one of the best things that will keep a teacher teaching.
This young man has a great
and I think, actually,
question around that. Secretary Whalen?
Two other ones.
We've got a lot on teachers we want to add.
Yeah, sure.
Put in a career switcher program so that people who really wanted to be teachers growing up but wanted to go make some money first have now gone to make money and now can come back and do what they really want to do. And so it's a short-term training program, especially for those who have a science and math background, to come and work back in the public schools. The other thing we've done is the teacher shortage is a national issue. It's not just in Virginia, though obviously we're concerned about Virginia. We have been recruiting from around 17 different states nearby of students who are graduating from college saying, hey, you don't know what good living is until you've come to the Commonwealth. And so we've had now what we have called our Great Virginia Teach-In. And we were hopeful we'd get maybe a couple of hundred folks. We've had over 1,000 people at each one of them. So there is a great interest, not just in teaching, but in teaching in the Commonwealth.
We have it centered at the convention center in Richmond, and teachers come in. I kind of come in and try to charge them up about the advantages of teaching here in Richmond, and it's been a great success. But there's no single silver bullet. One of the final thing we need to do is we need to respect our teachers more. Part of it is about pay, part of it is about strong leadership, but part of it's about recognizing that there's nothing that is more determinant of a student's success than a good teacher. 3 years in a row of a good teacher will show, regardless of your background, regardless of your socioeconomic upbringing, 3 years in a row of a good teacher is the best indicator of a student's success. 3 years in a row of a not so good teacher, even if you come from a fancy school with a good solid financial backing, 3 years in a row of a not good teacher means that your chances are you're not going to be a very successful student. So we've got to put more respect into honoring our teachers. But thank you for your question, Barbara.
Angie Callahan?
Okay, I have Celeste here. She's from Norview High School in Norfolk, and she has a question about honors classes.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Governor.
Good evening.
I'm currently enrolled in several different AP courses, and I have previously been enrolled in honors courses. I noticed with honors courses and general courses, they're weighted the same on your report card. I wanted to know if, as an incentive to get more students to take the extra step and be honors students and do the extra work, if maybe we could have honors courses weighted differently from general courses.
Well, Celeste, I actually think your honors courses, if you're then applying to college, that is noted on your transcript. And I think that colleges, when they review your resume and your background and are deciding whether they want to admit you or give you a scholarship, they will look at whether the rigor of your curriculum. And one of the things that we want to try to do is make sure that we can encourage more kids to stretch a little bit. Take that honors course, take that AP course. That's the whole notion behind our effort to get all of the colleges in Virginia to make sure those courses that qualify for college credit actually count towards your degree, because that should hopefully give not only you but your family the incentive, because if you can knock off a semester or so's worth of college in high school, you're going to save your family a lot of money.
Thank you.
How many agree with Celeste's point about this issue of the weighting of the honors? Is this an issue in the school in terms of determining what level of rigor you're going to be taking? Right. And I know, Governor, you're concerned about that issue of taking the toughest course you can handle.
That's exactly right, Kathy. What we've got to remember is, I know there's been a lot of debate about the SOLs, but the SOLs were only meant to be the floor. This was the minimum of what we would expect from our students to graduate and to receive a high school diploma. But the floor is not enough. We've got to make and encourage students to stretch. When the United States falls 16th in the world in terms of high school graduation rates, when India produces 3 times as many engineers every year as the United States, when we've got to recognize, as the statistics you laid out at the beginning of the show, that 2/3 plus of the jobs are going to require significant additional training and many of them hardcore technical knowledge to be competitive. We've got to encourage students and make the case that stretching a little bit makes sense. And as we found, as we talked earlier, a lot of times as we find students after the fact who say, gosh, I wish I would have gone ahead and taken that tougher course. By offering the opportunity to get guaranteed college credit, we hope that maybe we can help make the case.
I think this is probably, you know, a lot of students in school really clearly understand this issue, but the school situation here is so much different than it was when your parents might have been in school. That I wonder if your parents have the same sense of urgency or anxiety. Well, I don't want to say anxiety, of real expectation here. And so maybe we can talk about that in the course of the evening. Libby, go ahead.
Chris Jacobs is one of those great teachers you were referring to. He teaches Virginia and U.S. history at Green Run High School.
Good evening, Your Excellency. Governor, I was wondering, how would you and the National Governors Association effectively communicate the available opportunities to the average kid in high school?
Great question.
Great question. Well, Chris, probably I'd need your help to be able to communicate it. One of the things that we've, let me give you a couple of things we've tried to do. Secretary Whelan mentioned earlier that 30 governors are now talking about high school reform as part of their state agendas. The president has even started talking about raising standards in high school as well. That's very important. One of the things, we had a high school summit, a national high school summit that Bill Gates came in and talked to us about and charged us up because he talked about how we're falling behind the rest of the world. And at the end of that summit, the Gates Foundation and the Michael Dell Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, a number of nationally recognized education foundations put up $42 million to help us in the states lay out and publicize these agendas, and we hope to do more of that. This is what we're doing tonight. How can we raise and elevate this issue in the public's consciousness and parents' consciousness and guidance counselors' consciousness? But the only way we're really going to be successful is if we can get you, the teachers, involved. And part of what I hope we've been able to do, particularly with the effort we had over the last year, with the state stepping up with some additional support for public education, hopefully that will free up some of the financial burdens so that you guys can help us get the message out. But it's a challenge, and we're going to need your help.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Angie, go ahead.
This is Tommy. He's from Lansdowne High School in Virginia Beach, and he has a financial question.
Good evening.
Good evening.
With the vast amount of money already going to education in the Commonwealth, where will the extra finances come from that you need to fund these new programs, and what programs, if any, would have to suffer?
Well, that was, again, one of the reasons why we took on tax reform last year, because Virginia wasn't paying its bills in terms of education. And since we passed that, actually, Virginia's become the second fastest growing economy in the whole country. We got the second lowest unemployment, and we've added thousands and thousands of jobs just in the last 9 months, and a lot of times because businesses want to come to a state where they've got a well-educated workforce. So by having a healthy economy, one, we can generate the resources. Two, when we're talking about the idea of offering advanced placement courses in high school or dual enrollment with the community college, we actually save the state money, because if you decide to go to ODU or if you decide to go to UVA or Virginia Tech, even with the tuitions I know going up, the state provides a greater subsidy than even the tuition. So if we can end up having you knock off a semester's worth of college level work in high school, we not only save you and your family money, but we actually save the state money. And for the industry certification program, yes, we're going to have to spend a few dollars to go ahead and pick up the cost of some of those community college courses. But if the person can then, instead of going out making minimum wage after high school, can go out and make on average $5,000 to $8,000 more with that industry certification, the truth is they're going to pay a few more taxes with that. And again, from a business standpoint, it makes a great deal of sense. But good question.
Thank you. See, don't you like the way that that this young man has put that? He understands that you can't have everything without figuring out how you're going to pay for it, and if you have to do without.
You got to make a trade-off.
I think he's got a
Matter of
future
fact,
in
you might want to
politics.
run for the legislature. I'd love to have a lot, regardless of what party, I'd rather have a lot more legislators that could actually understand, read a balance sheet and understand that money that going in comes out with programs on the other side. Too often we end up with legislators who want to say, no taxes, no taxes, no taxes, but then want to still spend like mad. It doesn't work in the real world.
Yeah, nor does it work in your family either. Go ahead, Libby.
I'm here with Katie from Princess Anne High School, and she's a military dependent. She has a question that particularly deals with that issue.
Well, as a military dependent in the state, I am not eligible for in-state tuition because my parents are not legal residents. And several months ago, there was a bill proposed to grant this in-state tuition as long as the student was continuously enrolled in a state school, and the bill was stricken. I'm wondering why that happened and if you're going to do anything about it.
Well, Katie, actually, I think I got some good news for you because we did put funds in. I put funds in last year as part of tax reform to be able to allow military dependents to receive in-state tuition. This year in the budget, we did it just for last year, then we put some more in this year. My hope is we were going to be able to continue that going forward. It's really important because it's fair. It's got to be fair to you as a military family who's been transferred here. We want you to stay in Virginia. We want you to take advantage of what I think are still the nation's best public colleges and universities that we have here in Virginia. And it's really very important right now as we go into this whole BRAC process, where the Defense Department is looking at closing down some of our military installations if we don't support our military families. So that circumstance has changed. It is working kind of year to year based on how much revenues we have, and that may be the bill that you're talking about that didn't go through to institutionalize it forever. My hope is in the last budget that I submit, I plan on continuing this initiative, though.
Thank you.
Thank you, though.
And it's a great question, too, when we look at some of the military transfer patterns here, where we do have, particularly in the Navy, where you can have Navy personnel located essentially in one area like Hampton Roads, moving among different installations, but they could be here for a very long time. So thanks for your question. Go ahead, Angie.
I have Chris. Chris is a graduate of Kellam High School and the Advanced Technology Center in Virginia Beach, and he has a question about technology.
I've always been a technology geek, so I'm just wondering what new technologies, emerging technologies we can look forward to seeing in future classrooms.
Well, I think that broadband video is something that we will see more and more of. If we're offering, for example, the AP courses over this virtual technology, it's one way to learn. I think we need to see, when we have full kind of next generation internet into our schools, I think you'll be able to see much more real-time both video and voice going back and forth, so that it will be a much more active and collaborative experience than we see sometimes. Sometimes if you're dealing with slow data flows, you've got a video, as you probably know better than I, you end up, if you're just watching a TV or just seeing something over the internet with a teacher and you're not able to respond in a really interactive way, then the learning experience may not be as good. We hope to continue to advance and move to next generation Internet 2. The virtual AP school is a step in that direction, but you probably know better than I what may be headed down the path. But stay involved in technology. Yeah. Our hope is, particularly is with the Modeling and Simulation Center that we've got over in Suffolk, we really have an opportunity here in Hampton Roads to put together the next generation of the whole simulation industry. And that could be 5 years from now, rivaling the military as perhaps our the region's greatest economy. And it's going to take young folks with high-tech knowledge.
That's why a couple of us like the idea of calling this region Sim City.
I'm going to have more to say about that in the coming weeks. We've been working on this over the last couple of months, and we're going to have, I think, some very, very exciting opportunities.
Chris, may I ask you to stand up just one more time very quickly, and I'm sorry for all of our camera operators, but I just want to ask what it is you're doing now. You've graduated, and you graduated from the ATC. What are you doing now?
Yes, in the ATC, I got a chance to have an internship with Centera Healthcare, a big company around here, healthcare, and they actually picked me up, and right now I'm a network engineer for them.
So talk about this career path. When did you graduate?
Last year.
Last year. Mm-hmm. You're already, what are you at Centera? The king of the universe? What title do you have?
I work mainly on the operations center and I work on miscellaneous projects and whatnot.
So you're employed.
So he's a network engineer.
Network engineer at Centera with benefits?
Not yet.
Close. All right, we'll talk to you about that.
But on a career path,
On
right?
a career path.
I also got my CCNA certification in the ATC, which was a great opportunity.
Right. And that certification probably, and I won't be so rude to ask you how much extra income it allowed you to earn, but without that certification, you probably wouldn't have the job.
Right.
Great. Chris, congratulations. That's great.
Great job.
Yes, Libby, go ahead.
Well, I'm here with Tom Daring. Tom is a media specialist at Minchville High School in Newport News.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We still find many high school students lacking in basic reading, writing, and math skills, even after we have seen gains at the elementary school level. How do we get these students up to speed in these areas so that they are able to excel in the rigorous programs that you're going to propose?
Well, again, wish there was a single silver bullet. There really isn't. One of the things I was very worried about last year in 2004, that was the first year that students wouldn't graduate from Virginia high schools unless they passed, for example, their English and reading SOLs. And a lot of states had talked really tough about high standards and then retreated from those standards rather than dealing with the consequences component of not having students graduate. Well, what we did in Virginia, and there was an awful lot of teachers, principals, superintendents around the state that made it happen, we launched something called Project Graduation, where we offered online tutorials, after-school help, summer academies to give that extra remediation, because if we're going to raise the standards, we've got to be willing to kind of go the extra mile with the kids who need the extra help. And one of the best days I've had as governor, when we finally got the numbers back in this past fall, it showed that of the entering 12th grade 2004 class, 94.3% of them graduated. And that meant that that was the same running average as the last 5 years. So we raised the standards, the kids stepped up and met it, but I think it was because of the remediation efforts we went the extra mile with them on. So we've got to make sure that when a kid struggles, that we're able to be there with the remediation and extra help.
Great, thank you very much.
We've also Go ahead, Secretary Wheeler.
Community heavily involved in our schools, and while they started out more involved in our elementary schools, many more school divisions across the state are getting businesses to send employees in to work with middle and high school students as well, so that they can strengthen those basic skills.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that certainly is responding to a lot of their own employment workforce needs. So they really see the dollars and cents that it makes.
That's right. Pay me now or pay me later.
Exactly so. Exactly so. Go ahead, Angie.
This is Sherry. She's a student at Lakeland High School in Suffolk, and she has one of those questions about SOLs.
All right.
Yes, so you talked a lot about what you've done in the past to fix SOLs, but I was wondering what your thoughts of the future are, of what the requirements are going to change for the SOLs.
Well, I think that the state requirements for the SOLs probably won't change too much. I think we continue to need to make sure that the curriculum is actually aligned with the SOLs, so that you're being tested on what you actually learned in the classroom. What we've got to be careful with, though, is that with the President's legislation, the No Child Left Behind, that we don't have to actually reinvent the wheel when the new restrictions for No Child Left Behind get implemented across the state and across the whole country, for that matter. So I met recently with the United States Secretary of Education, Margaret Spellings, and I've said, you got to not have us reinvent the wheel. Give us the flexibility we need. We've learned and made some mistakes along the way with our SOLs, but don't make us try to create a whole new system of accountability. Let us continue to grow this system and improve on it, and not have a new system superimposed on us by the federal government.
If I'm not mistaken, the other piece that concern on the part of the Commonwealth has to do with this idea that we've been at this a while,
right.
So don't expect our improvement rates to go through the roof when other people are starting at ground zero.
The federal government they've really put some pretty crazy requirements in there. They have, in effect, penalized, as you said, those states who are further down the path towards accountability. They actually, until recently, and they still haven't changed this rule, I'm hopeful they will, they say if a student doesn't pass the SOL or any other equivalency exam, that they won't let them take the exam again. Well, that's crazy in my mind. Our whole idea should not be to make the exam such a high-stress item. We got to say, you got to pass, but if you don't pass, we're going to work with you to give you the extra help and let you try again. Because sometimes a student might come in, it might just be an off day. We all have an off day, and you wouldn't want that to hold back the student. You've got to give them the extra help and the chance to test again. And again, my hope is that we'll see a little more flexibility from the federal government.
And I'm guessing as chair of the National Governors Association, they take your calls. And
Well,
things
I
like
think
that.
we're going to put some pressure on. This is not, let me assure you, this is not a partisan issue. Here in Virginia, it has actually been more of folks in the Republican Party in the legislature who've raised the biggest concerns about the No Child Left Behind legislation. And we are working in a bipartisan way to try to get the federal government to listen to us.
Has some dramatic impacts for us all. Go ahead, Libby.
Carla is here representing Granby High School, where she's a junior, and she also has a question about SOLs.
Good evening,
Good
Mr.
evening.
Governor. My question is just plain and simple. Are SOLs really useful for a student's advancement?
She's asked the big one.
There's the big one. I think they are. Because, go back to the earlier gentleman's question from the Eastern Shore, we still have uneven grading systems around the state. You have, I'm sure, in your own high school, some teachers that are really tough, some teachers that kind of let you slide by and might give you an easy grade. That's not, we're not being fair to you if you kind of glide by, get easy grades, and then you suddenly go into college and you find you're not prepared for the work. It's not fair. Particularly, I was the first person in my family to go to college. I meet a lot with first-generation kids going to college. You save and scrape, and you save all this money, you go to college, and then you find you're not prepared for college work. The whole idea of the SOLs is to make sure that no matter what high school you graduate from, whether it's Granby High in Norfolk, whether it's Thomas Jefferson High School in Fairfax, whether it's Grundy High School in Southwest Virginia and Grundy, that when you get that high school diploma, it carries value. It means that you have mastered English and math and reading. And that's one of the ways that we judge that, is by having these kind of exams.
Sorry, I think they're here for a while.
I think they're here for a while.
And Granby is the home of the International Baccalaureate program
Yes,
in Norfolk as well. Go ahead, Angie.
Okay, this is Nicole. Nicole is a graduate of Tallwood High School in Virginia Beach, and she's also a graduate of the ATC. But she has a question about teachers.
Yeah, with the to make it more more teacher-friendly state for Virginia, you address the part of paying them better and giving them more financial benefits. Well, I had a teacher that quit as soon as she found out that her class was going to be an SOL class, because she didn't want to have to make it all like a memorization thing. She wanted, because you said that the SOLs aren't perfect, but she didn't want that to be on her at all.
But I have got to tell you, now with the federal legislation, the No Child Left Behind, if you're going to teach in this country, no matter what state you're going to go to, there's going to be standards, accountability. There's going to be some form of an exam that will have high stakes to it. They may not call it SOLs. They call it different things in every state I've been to. But this whole notion of making sure that our students, we can measure their progress, is here to stay. And again, I go back to when you look at who we're competing with. We're not just competing with kids between Norfolk versus Chesapeake versus Portsmouth. You're competing with students, sorry, Secretary Whelan, she gets on me when I call you guys kids instead of students. You're competing with students in China and India and Japan and France. And if you look at our graduation rates and our college-going rates, we're falling behind. Matter of fact, between 1994 and 2004, for the first time in America's history, the college graduation rate and college participation rate was flat. And as a matter of fact, even in a country like England now, there was a greater percentage of students going on to college than there is in the United States. Well, that ought to scare us if we're concerned about where our economy's headed. And as I said, higher stakes and greater accountability and the SOL type exams, they're not perfect. But I've not found anything in education yet that's been perfect, and I think they are here to stay. We've got to make sure we keep the pressure on to continue to improve them. We've got to make sure that we don't make it just about SOLs. One of the things I'm trying to add now is a renewed focus on art and music, physical education. We've got to make sure we do more to encourage healthier lifestyles. So we look more at the overall education, not just on the academic subjects, but we had to go through this period of kind of getting used to the SOLs, I think, before we could once again reinforce those other very, very critical parts of a young person's education.
Thank you for the question. Governor, one of the things that our questioner asks has to do with how you get it all into a day. And you talked about art and music and physical ed and all that. Some schools have experimented with year-round schools, and I know that at the high school level, perhaps because of athletics and bus schedules and all the rest of it, that's kind of a tough sell. But I wonder if your colleagues in the Governors Association have taken a look at that.
You know, Kathy, we have tried actually here in Virginia year-round schools. There was a couple, I think, actually here in Hampton Roads, and what we found was after a few years they wanted to go back to the traditional schedule. I do think we have to look at the idea of whether a longer school year, I know I'm not going to make myself very popular here, or an extended school day. We also have to, while athletics are very important, we got to remember that academics are the reason you go to school. And in too many high schools, I was in Georgia earlier this week, and one of the questions I got there was, you know, the real issue in many high schools is the most important person is the high school coach, and not the principal. And
That's a
how do you make sure that you put the focus not only on athletics but on give the same kind of recognition to the kids who do well in academics? We in Virginia have got something I was at recently, a robotics competition that had every bit as much enthusiasm as any high school football or basketball game I've been to. But stretching out the school day a little bit longer is something I think we're going to have to look at some point.
If we're going to rise on that list.
If we're going to rise on the list, if we're satisfied with being 16th in the world in terms of graduation rates, we can stay where we're at. But unless we try some of the things we've talked about tonight, unless we raise the rigor of our curriculum, incent the kids to take the tougher courses, encourage kids who are not going on to college to get that industry certification, make sure that those kids who need the extra help get it, because we can't afford to lose anyone, then America's standard as the gold standard, as the best economy in the world, will slide.
Let's go to Libby. Go ahead.
I'm here with Wyatt. Wyatt is an ATC student with Kellam High School, and he has a question in regard to the Perkins Act.
Good evening, Governor. I'm here more so representing Advanced Technology Center tonight, but before I get on with my question, I'd like to react with the previous question, if that's okay?
Go right ahead, real quickly.
I don't know if the longer workday or the longer school year is actually the better choice, and I probably speak for the majority of the students. We probably do. We actually have a pretty large workload when you implement the SOLs and the SOL standards. So you have to consider what you're already putting on us and the possibilities of putting more on us to fit more into the school schedule that we have now.
We'll put you down opposed.
Let me try to answer that, because one of the things is you guys have been part of the generation that started about mid-career in your education with the whole notion of SOLs. My hope is that as students who are starting now, who are going to be in a curriculum that starts with kindergarten and goes through high school, where the curriculum has been aligned, where there is a system of accountability throughout the whole school career, there won't be the same burden that perhaps the SOLs have been over the last couple of years. So I think we're getting it better. I got to tell you, the percentage of concerns I hear about the SOLs today versus 3 years ago when I was first elected, and clearly versus what was taking place 8 or 9 years ago when they first started, is dramatically better. The number of teachers who now come up and say, you know, I wasn't sure they were going to work, but actually they have ended up raising standards. So I think they're here to stay. We still need to make some improvements, but we also have to recognize you're competing against kids who are going much longer days and have a much longer school year. Matter of fact, America has one of the shortest school years of any industrialized country in the world.
And math is not my strongest suit, but we don't have time for the rest of your question. I hate to tell you that. But I'm sure the governor will stay afterwards to answer it. Will that work for you?
It was a quick question.
All right, real quick.
Okay. Recently, the Congress has cut the funds to the Perkins Act. I was wondering what you and the rest of the governors plan to do to keep government-funded vocational programs alive and for the future.
I can answer that quickly. I oppose those cuts, and I'm trying to encourage our congressional delegation to stop the president's proposed cuts. When we are in this competitive world economy, we've got to make sure we continue to support those Perkins and vocational training acts.
Secretary Wheeling, Governor Warner, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you for terrific questions that you all have been working hard on. Thank you very, very much. And by the way, if you are a high school student watching at home, you can also share your experiences by taking a special online survey set up by the National Governors Association. Just go to rateyourfuture.org. And for more information on the National Governors Association, the website is nga.org. And I think that's where you can also find that list of where the United States is in terms of high school and college graduation rates. It will surprise you. Again, our thanks to Governor Warner, to our studio audience, and to Secretary Wheeling. Thank you for joining us as well tonight for this very special presentation. I'm Kathy Lewis for all of us at WHRO. Good night.